Welcome back to the Exempt List. Today, we are talking about all things Week 8 NFL, which was a wacky week with no teams on a bye. Everyone played, and I feel like the quality of football. Week 8 is in the books. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to get to, a lot to laugh at. But first, I can introduce my guest for the week, ESPN's Bill Barnwell. Bill, how you doing? Football extraordinaire.
I love to be on the exempt list. No matter what network it's on, I feel like it is always a joy to hop on. So very flattered to be back here chopping it up with you, Charles.
Thank you. I always enjoy our conversations. I feel like we can talk about the game in a serious way, but we always end up having fun and laughing along the way. And we'll get to some funny stuff because I would be remiss as someone who spent time on the Jets and Giants beat to not talk about that game this past weekend. But we'll get some of the, I guess more serious stuff out the way first. The NFL trade deadline is in about 24 hours. We're recording this 5:30 Eastern for those of you who are curious on Monday, October 30th. And so far we have one, I would say, notable trade. The Giants have traded defensive lineman Leonard Williams to the Seahawks for a 2024 second and a 2025 fifth round pick. These years just sound so fake. Like, I just remember back in the day, like this is the point where I would quit like a dynasty mode or a Madden franchise. I was like, what the hell is the 2023 NFL draft? Like, that doesn't even sound something that I'll experience in my lifetime. But here we are. The Giants are going to eat most of his salary. Leonard's a free agent after the season. Bill, first of all, what was your take on this trade when it came across?
Yeah, I was really surprised, Charles, that the Giants got so much at first because, like you said, Williams was going to be a free agent after the year. He was on a very expensive contract, courtesy of our old friend Dave Gettleman. Paid him like a franchise player. I think gave him the franchise tag at one point as well after trading for him in the first place from the Jets. So when it made more sense when I heard that the Giants were paying down a significant chunk of this deal to get a contract done. And I started thinking, how common is that going to be here in the next 24, 48 hours? Like, are we going to see more teams doing what the Rams did when they traded for Von Miller and giving up more draft capital to get a player in your building for less money? So, I think the trade in itself makes sense. Pretty obvious. The Seahawks have a team that can compete for not just a playoff berth, but for first place in the NFC West, compete for the top spot in the NFC. Giants, to say they're going nowhere would be an insult to the thought of staying put and not doing anything. That seems fun. What the Giants are doing, as we'll talk about, was not fun yesterday. It has not been fun all season. Made sense for them to move on. They need cap relief. They've been pretty much in dire cap straits for the entirety of the Brandon Beane era. So getting rid of one of these high-paid guys now that they're not competing made sense. But I think it tells you that you're going to see more teams trying to get players in their building without having to absorb some of the bigger contracts that are attached to those guys right now.
Yeah, I thought one of the more interesting things that came from the Leonard trade, because I don't know if the Leonard trade like by itself is all that surprising, because of all the reasons you said. I mean, this team is super dead in the water. Like that game on Sunday, it really did feel like, all right, we need to close up shop here, press the button, start over again next year. But Josina Anderson reported that Saquon Barkley is not going anywhere on trade, which I find to be pretty interesting because if you're talking about maybe pieces that you can sell off, would Saquon Barkley not be one of the few pieces that you have that another team might be interested in? And he's on the franchise tag. I don't really know why they would be so inclined to bring him back next season unless the franchise tag is just, it's doable, cheap again. I'm a little surprised that they are holding on to Saquon Barkley unless the trade offers are just horrendous for him.
Could be. I mean, there's a lot of running backs who are likely available. And so it could just be that there's so many backs out there that teams are not giving up more than a late round pick to get Barkley off your roster. Maybe they're saying the Giants have to pay a significant sum of money even to get a mid-round pick for Saquon Barkley. The cynical side of me wonders if maybe the Giants see the possibility of signing Saquon to an extension as their way of, overcoming the PR hit from a disastrous season, which they're in the middle of right now. And, probably making the wrong move in giving Daniel Jones $40+ million a year. I don't know, Charles, are you ready to?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, because my thing back in the offseason was like these top contracts for running backs, it's not like they're super duper expensive anymore. Like even the Jonathan Taylor deal was like 3 for $42. You can probably get out after 2 years. That's, to me, it's just not something that's really crippling to your franchise anymore. So I would have been on the side of franchise tag Daniel Jones and then see if you can work out something with Saquon Barkley that kind of, maybe like it could have been like a 2-year, $26 million deal, which would have been more than the franchise tag at this point. I just kind of think we've gotten to a point where these contracts are so low, it wouldn't really hurt teams that much to dole out, a 2 or 3 year deal, because I don't really view that as any worse than another contract around that range that doesn't work out for a team.
No question. And I think the Giants, frankly, if they had gone and given Saquon 2 franchise tags, if they'd been like, hey, we're going to guarantee you the next 2 years on franchise tags, I think that would have qualified as a deal. I think it would have got the deal done. And I don't think the Giants were willing to do that. So, I mean, I like the idea of them using Saquon as like a PR boost at the end of the year, given how bad this season has been. But I really wonder if they're just at a point where they just think, we don't think Saquon's worth that. And so, but we have fans who think Saquon is worth that. And I agree with you. I don't think getting a Saquon deal done would have been onerous or would have hurt the Giants' chances of competing in the same way that signing Daniel Jones to a real NFL contract actually did hurt the Giants' chances of competing. But we've seen Daniel Jones without Saquon Barkley this year, it has not been pretty. Granted, it's not been very pretty with Saquon Barkley, but it does feel like they need Barkley to have any hope of getting anything out of Daniel Jones. So, I think they've created a situation that is a mess, and I think they recognize that at this point, trading Saquon Barkley and giving up on this would be giving up on the season, and I think it would inspire an even bigger PR hit for this franchise. And remember, like, this is an ownership group that is very consciously aware of the fans' reaction to stuff. They fired Ben McAdoo after the Eli Manning incident. They, basically moved on from Joe Judge after his situation deteriorated in the final few games of the year. Left to their own devices, I think the Giants ownership group would keep the same coach, keep the same GM, keep the same quarterback for a decade at a time. But, I do think that they recognize that trading Saquon would be infuriating to a fan base that has lots of reasons to be angry at the Giants for mishandling things right now.
Yeah, well, and now that you start talking about this, we'll get to it when we talk about the Jets-Giants game. But looking at that game, and then if they were to trade Saquon right after that game, it'd be like, whoa, okay, because that's all you had. That's literally all you had.
That was the entire offense.
Literally the entire offense, because they finished with negative pass yards. But we'll get to that in a second. Another trade that's come through, the Falcons have traded a conditional 6th-round pick for Eagles defensive tackle Kentavius Street. I guess, with the Grady Jarrett injury, he tore his ACL after the game. No, I mean, it's just, I'm losing reasons to kind of to tap into this season now. That Grady Jarrett injury, I wasn't really expecting it to be an ACL because they kind of kept quiet about it during the game. And then I woke up from a nap today and it was on my phone. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. But I don't really have too many takes on Kentavius Street. I mean, he's been a rotational player for the Eagles defensive line, which is pretty loaded with Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Milton Williams, those guys on the interior, Jordan Davis. So there wasn't a whole lot of room for him, but he'll play in Atlanta for sure because they are running low on defensive linemen. Did you have any takes on Kentavius Street? I'm honestly not too familiar with what he's done since he came to the Eagles.
No, I mean, I've watched every Kentavius Street snap prepping for this show. No, I mean, I always love that when teams trade for a player and 20 minutes later, fans like these oh, I watched all this guy's film tape. And I'm like, you knew you were going to trade for this backup defensive tackle. And yet all his tendencies now. Come on. It's okay not to know anything. It's not a big deal. You can't know every single player in the NFL. I'm not going to pretend that I have strong, Kentavius Street takes about what he's going to do in this defense. But I think talking about the broader idea of what this defense has done, they've succeeded despite not having a great pass rush. And maybe on one hand you say, okay, that's good because we know that they're not going to be desperate to have an incredible pass rush to survive the way that some other teams, when their rush slows down, the Niners are a good example, their secondary might not be able to hold up. The Falcons secondary, yesterday, maybe not the best example, but in general, they've been pretty good despite middling sack numbers. But like, they're still replacing Grady Jarrett. Like, you're not going to be able to go out and get someone who's as good as Grady Jarrett. So, I think it's logical to go out and try to get some rotational guys. Maybe they'll add somebody else in free agency. Maybe they'll sign somebody. Adding pieces and trying to win with, having a deeper rotation makes more sense than trying to replace Grady Jarrett, because even if he's not the guy he was at his peak or at his best, like, he's still a guy who's going to be a difference maker. And there's only a few guys in the NFL who have his level of athleticism on the interior.
Yep. So just another blow. That game on Sunday was so bad. So bad. On down basis, the defense was not horrendous, but you just gave up, basically 3 huge bombs that you couldn't end up losing that game. Like, the one drive that was really like frustrated them on down basis was the one where like Hopkins caught like a little crosser and ran it in instead of like the deep bombs. But it was just like, damn, dude, you guys are kind of close, but you're still liable to do something like this, which is really frustrating as a fan. But whatever.
Can we be honest here, Charles? Can we be open about how we feel about things? That first Hopkins touchdown was OPI. We can be honest, right?
Yes, it was. It was.
He assaulted AJ Terrell.
Yeah. But AJ, you got to play through you got to keep playing. I don't know.
No question. Yeah. I don't disagree, but that should have been OPI.
Should have been OPI.
The other 3 touchdowns, that's kind of on the Falcons defense.
For sure.
And it's frustrating because, like, I don't think people realize, like, so much of our conversation about the Falcons is get the ball to Kyle Pitts, get the ball to Drake London, who got hurt yesterday, get the ball to Bijan Robinson. Like, those players are exciting. Like, this defense is actually good. This defense is carrying this team right now to be a competent football team. And so we don't have the conversations we should about this defense unless they suck the way they did yesterday, or unless we're talking about the offense. So it's a bummer that we're only talking about Grady Jarrett and this Falcons defense because they had a bad game, because they've been, quietly one of the more impressive defenses in football so far this year.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. They still have a really, really easy schedule. You're likely getting Jaron Hall on Sunday in his first NFL start for the Vikings after that Kirk Cousins injury. So, hopefully they'll win, but I thought they were going to handle business against the Will Levis, little Malik Willis combo, and they didn't. So we'll see what happens.
Do you want to talk about the quarterback situation? Do you not want to talk about it? I would not blame you if you don't want to talk about it.
Let's talk about it real briefly. I don't really know how I feel about this, because honestly, I know that Taylor Heineke played better than Ridder in the second half, but I don't think I saw Taylor Heineke do anything that Desmond Ridder has not done already this year. And I know that if they give Taylor Heineke the rest of the season, it's probably going to be somewhat of a mess. I mean, he's here making like $10 million a year for a reason. So I don't really know how I feel. I just want them to start moving the ball like I know they can on offense, because they have pieces, but it's just been so sloppy. And I think the most frustrating part for me, as someone who thought Ridder, could put together maybe like a little average season, was I think he's gotten a lot better throwing the ball as the seasons progress. But the fumbles, you can't tolerate someone fumbling at that rate. So it's very frustrating all around, because Taylor Heineke is not the solution to the Falcons quarterback problem. If he's on the roster next year, I'm hoping to the backup role to somebody else. It's just a little disappointing that we're here right now.
I think what's so frustrating about it is we saw, to me at least, what I was hoping this Falcons offense would look like. But we saw it from the Titans in that game. Like, this should be an offense where you should be taking shots, you should be hitting play action, you should be chucking the ball downfield, because you have those playmakers who can outrun guys, who can win one-on-one, who can create in space. Like, and when I've watched this offense from the Falcons from week to week, like, they've had a week here and there where we're just hit those throws, but it's almost always been like, we're running tons of screens. We are, we're having Jonnu Smith throw passes to Michael Pruitt near the goal line.
That one felt like a little like playful FU from Arthur to Vrabel.
It felt like a bit.
Yes, because Pruitt was on the Titans too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so like, having those guys score a touchdown probably would have been funny for Arthur, but we gotta win a game, buddy. I was overthinking it a little bit too much. The Ridder stuff, I still kind of hope he gets a chance to play. Maybe you just sit him down until the bye, only because I'm fine with Taylor Heineke being on this roster. I don't really think having Taylor Heineke start the rest of the season changes anything about your outlook. Like, you would still need to go get a quarterback. You still need to, figure out what your asset allocation is going to be to get that quarterback. Because unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be bad enough based on how the defense is playing and the rest of their schedule the rest of the way to end up at like the top 5 of the draft. So I don't know. I think you still need to learn like what Ridder is full time, and he's made some progress. It's just not enough.
Would you want them, if the Titans call you tomorrow and say, "Hey, we're moving on from Tannehill. We got Levis. We're good." Would you want Tannehill?
I mean, for like a 7th, like a conditional 7th. Yeah,
right.
Maybe.
Like
just for some insurance.
We're good there. But I mean, you're right though. Like you know what you have in Taylor Heineke. Like, even if his floor is a tiny bit higher than Desmond Ridder's, like, the best case scenario for your franchise is giving Ridder an entire season and seeing that he can either do it or not do it. You can make a more informed decision. So he's gotten better as the season gone along. I think you're right. Like, he can throw. It's not that he can't make throws. He's so inconsistent protecting the football. And I'd like to think you can coach that out. I saw the Giants do it with Tiki Barber. Frankly, I saw the Giants do it with Daniel Jones. Like, he was a fumbling mess and got better with that as his career has gone along. But you need to get reps to do that. And if they're going to move on from him, if they're not going to give him the reps, like, he's not going to get any better.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they were saying it was like a concussion during the game, and now they're being like, they're not even really bringing up the concussion in the post-game stuff and the meetings today. So I don't really know what to think there. We'll see what happens with Desmond Ridder and the Falcons for the rest of the season. I don't really have a whole lot of hope there. I just want, by the end of the season, can I have like a little and one mixtape package of Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson plays? That's all I want. So I can look back and say, hey, a little 8 and 9, 7 and 10, but we had some real highlights along the way.
Dude, if they go 8 and 9, they might make the playoffs.
Yeah, they might win the division.
They might win the division. They might even make the wild card. Like with the Vikings, with Kirk getting hurt, there are 6 teams in the NFC you would feel pretty good about making the playoffs. So you have Eagles, Cowboys, Lions, 49ers, Seahawks, and then whichever godforsaken team wins the NFC South. Who wins who ends up being the 7th seed in the NFC?
I don't know. It's a dark, just a dark thing to think about right now.
The Vikings just lost Kirk Cousins. The Rams might have lost Matthew Stafford. It might be going on IR as we record this. We don't know. The Giants are out. The Bears are out. The Packers look to be out. It might be the Commanders, or it might be the 2nd place team in the NFC South. Wow. How scary is that?
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Because you're right. Now that I'm looking at it, there's absolutely a scenario where 2 teams from the NFC South make the playoffs. And it's pretty feasible based on what happened this past weekend. Wow.
You might get Falcons at 49ers in the wild card round.
I would not want to see that whatsoever at all. Like, I'm so good on watching that team come to Atlanta and just absolutely demolish them. But let's get to some teams that, or at least one team that has no shot at making the playoffs. And I think it was the funniest thing from this sports weekend. And I want to preface this by saying I was supposed to go to this game. I was supposed to go to the Giants-Jets game. I've seen a million Giants-Jets games. I still like to pop over there every once in a while to show my face, say what's up to people. But after I got back from Philly for the Eagles-Dolphins game, I got sick. And I actually had to, obviously, out of courtesy to the people around me, I ended up bailing on going to the Giants-Jets game, which I was a little disappointed about. And then the game started, and the game kept going. And I was watching it. I had it on one TV. I had the Falcons game on another TV. I was like, this is too much for me. Like, I can only take so much crap, and I'm already getting it on one screen. So let me go flip and find like another real football team. This is like one of the saddest final, like in terms of final numbers, I don't know if you can find as like a sadder performance than the Giants offense and what they put together this past weekend. They finished the game with -9 passing yards. I think they had, so they had 7 total passing yards that like made it past the line of scrimmage, but they lost 16 yards in terms of sack yardage. So they ended up with -9 passing yards for an entire game of NFL football in 2023. Tyrod Taylor got hurt, suffered a rib injury. They had to put in Tommy DeVito, who is, I'm not really sure what he is. He's like a local kid who went to Rutgers, undrafted quarterback. and he got the work. And work is like a strong term because they were petrified of him doing anything with the football, which I kind of get against a defense like the Jets. They're ravenous. Your offensive line's pretty bad. But they just went into a total shell of an offense where I don't know if you've looked up his ADOT, his average depth of target for that game. Have you looked it up?
No, it has to be negative though, right?
Yes. It's negative 2.2. So he's throwing the ball on average, negative 2.2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. His completion percent over expectation was minus 46.9%, which is just unbelievable. Like you're not even participating in the offense. And one of the craziest things was like, so when the game ends, or not the game ends, but they kind of need to put together a drive at the end of the game. All they're doing is throwing screens to Saquon Barkley, who finished the game with 3 catches for 0 yards. And he had 36 carries for 128 yards. So if you just put together like this game that Saquon Barkley had, and we go back to what we were talking about earlier, well, why wouldn't they trade Saquon Barkley? Because this is what your offense looks like when you don't have a quarterback. He's your only chance of winning. He had 39 touches. They threw the ball 14 times. I don't even know what else to say here. Like, and it's so fun because, Brian Dable on the sideline, he gets so mad, like where he's throwing his headset and he's getting all red. And look, I get it too, because if I walked out of the game with minus 9 passing yards as an offensive guy, I might just hang it up and quit.
Charles, it's been maybe 2 months ago. Like the Giants were supposed to be one of the most exciting offenses in football. Like their fans were like furious at me for suggesting that the Giants would not be good on offense this year. It's like, you don't get it. We brought in Paris Campbell, Darren Waller. Like we got Daniel Jones coming back. We got Saquon. It's like, you guys don't know. Like I went through and I went through like the history of these breakout coaches who were OCs who became first-year head coaches. And like, yes, sometimes you land on Sean McVay. Sometimes you land on, Matt LaFleur. Usually you get Adam Gase. Usually you get Freddie Kitchens. You get guys who look exciting for a year, and then year 2, they take a major step backwards. And admittedly, like not having Daniel Jones hurt, admittedly, this was like a good Jets defense. Admittedly, the offensive line is a mess. They've banged up with injuries. But like the scariest thing about all this, Charles, is that you just quoted me all those numbers about the Giants, and they still should have won. Like they still were in position to win this football game. Clearly, Brian Dable's formula was just, our offense is terrible, but their offense is probably just as bad. If we can just not turn the ball over and they can get them to turn the ball over, we probably win this game. And he was right until the Wingdings Comic Sans ending to this game happened over the final 30 seconds of football.
Dude, Graham Gano, so he missed like a 35-yard field goal that would have put them up 13-7, which essentially would have ended the game. Because then you're asking Zach Wilson not just to get them field goal range, but to actually score a touchdown. And it's not like the Jets offense really did anything either. But they averaged 4 yards a play.
They failed on their first 13 third down attempts in this game.
Yes, I was about to say, these teams combined to go 4 for 34 on third down. 4 for 34? Like, this game set football back like 50 years. Sammy Ball's looking at this game and be like, what the hell are you guys doing, man?
Run the damn ball.
They tried. They certainly did try. I would love to know how Saquon Barkley's feeling today, just smashing his face into the Jets front seven basically 40 times over the course of the game, because he only had 128 yards. Like, that's 3.6 yards per carry. It's not like he was having a very successful day on the ground either. But I want to go back to Graham Gano, because I think this part is kind of underrated, funny for what happened in that game. He's hurt right now. Like, he's injured. Graham Gano, here's how I can tell you that he's hurt, besides just the team coming out and saying it. His field goal percentages over the last 4 years. So in 2020, 96.9, 2021, 87.9, 2022, 90.6. This year, he's at 64.7. Like, why are you still letting him kick these field goals? 64.7. Like, that's not even if you didn't have any money tied up to him, you would cut him immediately. So I don't understand why they are continuing to do this. And how can you be surprised that he missed that kick? Because he's missed so many other kicks this year.
But that's the thing, Charles. Brian Daboll looked at his options and he was like, we got a kicker who's injured. We have Saquon, who is being ground into dust over the course of this game. And we have Tommy DeVito at quarterback, who did run in a touchdown earlier in this game, which is incredible. We could get Tommy DeVito to throw the football. Like, Jets are not going to be expecting a pass. This could be our one chance. And Brian Daboll was like, yeah, we got to get that injured kicker out there for this field goal. But that should tell you what little faith he had in his offense to get a single yard to win this game. But you know what? Like we can and should criticize the Giants offense. Even after Gano misses that field goal, all the Giants defense has to do with 25 seconds left, is not allow the Jets to pick up like 55 yards to get in field goal range. And they did. They allowed back-to-back 29-yard gains and a spike with 1 second left to set up that game-tying field goal.
It's hilarious. Like, it's hilarious. And I can't decide if I'm glad that I was sick and I couldn't go, or if I would have liked to go. I would have liked to have been there by the end of the game. Because the first 3.5 quarters, it's slop, man. Because I covered the Greg Williams, Adam Gase Jets, where the defense was good, but the offense was bad. And those are the worst teams to cover because nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. Like, they're just punting and punting and punting and forcing the other team to punt and punt and punt. And then you're finally blessed with something because someone has to win the game at the end of it. And I think it would have been funny just to watch them. Like, they were just spamming screens at the end of the game. Like, their 2-minute offense at the end was just trying to get a screen to pop off for Saquon Barkley against one of the fastest defenses in football. It's like, I don't understand how Giants fans can keep this thing moving and feel good about how they spent their Sundays.
Do you think Jets fans should feel good about what happened here?
No. Because, you're trying to find some signs of life on offense, I think. And even this time, Breece Hall, he couldn't even really get going on the ground, even though he had a nice reception. And really, it feels like their offense now is just, where's Garrett Wilson? Can we get him free for like a 60-yard touchdown? Because outside of that, the Zach Wilson improvements, bit is kind of funny because he's improved to like being, someone you feel comfortable being your backup, maybe, instead of maybe. I don't know if even for all the way there yet. So I don't really think any team should feel good about that. I was talking to one of my friends who's the Jets fans yesterday. He was like, that was just repulsive football, like all the way through. Couldn't even sit down and watch the whole game because it's so bad.
If you turn that game off, you missed the ending, which was incredible. There's no more perfect ending for that game than a Zach Wilson bomb to a receiver who had barely played all year, which was underthrown by at least 5 yards. And Adoree Jackson just going into full-on panic mode and tackling a receiver for a terrible pass interference penalty. Just the perfect ending to that game.
Yeah. So I look, if I was the Giants, I would have trade everybody, even Saquon. I get why they didn't, because that would have been a bad look after that game. The only reason we had a chance in that game was because of him on offense. So I get why you kind of don't trade him, but this team's so dead in the water. Like, Daniel Jones coming back isn't going to fix anything. Andrew Thomas coming back might make you look more like a football team, but overall, it's just kind of crazy that, like, I was with you in terms of, I didn't expect this team to make it back to the playoffs after last year, because last year was so fluky. Like, they were just, every time they played a good team, they got demolished. But this is really something else in terms of how far they've fallen. I mean, they averaged 2.8 yards a play on Sunday. It's like what I would expect, like, if you put Georgia on the field against some NFL team. Maybe you could get 2 yards of play.
Can you imagine, by the way, how incredible it must be to be Leonard Williams right now? Like, you just went through this terrible half of a season. You had to deal with that game. You have the rest of this season with the Giants where you have nothing to look forward to. And then you get traded to the Seahawks. Like, that's incredible. Like, you're on a fun team. Your coach is happy to be there. Your quarterback is good. You have good playmakers around. That's like, it must feel like new life is being breathed into his lungs after what he had to endure yesterday.
Yeah. Last funny thing from the weekend before we get into some of these games. This podcast has been all over Sam Howell watch because he was on pace to absolutely smash the sack record. I think he was on pace for 96 last week, but somehow, over 52 dropback or 52 passing attempts against the Eagles. He was only sacked one time, which dropped his pace to 87 sacks for the season, which would still smash David Carr's record of 76. But we're getting into a little bit of hot water now in terms of people who are really locked onto this. I'm a little worried that Sam's figured out how to throw the ball, which is good for his own health, but bad for my entertainment as a fan.
I mean, I was shocked. I was like figuring this was going to be like a 10-sack game for the Eagles, and maybe they blamed Kentavius Street. Maybe they were just like, Street, ruined the game for us. We got to get him out of here. This should have been a big game for us. I mean, the one sack they got was a brutal Hassan Reddick sack on 4th down at the perfect time. But the Commanders, I feel like they just have something about them that helps them play the Eagles tough. Like maybe it's the front four, maybe it's they've run the ball well against the Eagles. I don't know, but they seem to be a tough matchup for Philly. I will say there was one thing I feel like we should hit that was funny from this weekend, which was Deontay Johnson getting his money worth and like going on like a 3-minute rant about how terrible the refs were in that game. Because it really felt like a situation where like he said the first thing and then was like, he realized like, okay, I'm getting fined for this. I might as well get my money's worth and just keep going. Just like, they're not going to find any extra for criticizing the refs for 3 minutes as opposed to 20 seconds. Just an incredible rant from a team that what he was being like, his argument was, we didn't get a 55-yard field goal, and that cost us the game in a game where they lost by 10 points and had a total of 3 points in the first half.
Yeah, and the Jaguars, they only had 20 more penalty yards than the Steelers too. So I think I would put a lot of that on your offense is not good at all. They got nothing. All right, let's move on to some of the things that happened in week 8. And I think it's impossible to not start off with what's wrong with the Chiefs offense. I kind of feel like the answer is a little bit simple. Their wide receiver situation is horrendous. And for some reason, it seems to have like taken a step back from last year, which is a little surprising, right? Because it's mostly the same guys. But no one's really developed. You're still relying on Travis Kelce, who is still a great player, but I think you're starting to see his age a little bit with how he's moving on the field and in terms of his ability to get away from guys. So you still have like this obviously, I think, the best quarterback in football, Patrick Mahomes, but they're pressing and he doesn't trust anyone. And then you see like the Sky Moore drop in the end zone. You kind of get why he doesn't trust anyone. I just want to wonder if this is a team where like they have that second half of the season, all right, we're going to turn it around. We're going to figure out what works for us. Or if this is just what's going to be all the way through until the playoffs start.
That's a fair question. I mean, I did see them win the AFC Championship game last year with Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Marcus Kemp as their two like every down wide receivers. I've seen Patrick Mahomes make magic happen with Kelce before, but they have to be realistic about how that offense is going to be without significant wide receivers. And they can still win. We saw them do it last year. We saw them win a Super Bowl without it, but you have to have every single like advantage you can get with motion, with leverage, with Kelce playing at a high level. And I think the crucial one is they have to run the ball effectively. Like you can't get, an anonymous game from Isaiah Pacheco in the running game and expect to win with these wide receivers. As good as Patrick Mahomes is, like their counterpunch last year was getting bigger. They went with 2-3 tight end sets more often. I think they doubled or almost tripled their multiple tight end usage. They ran the ball straight up more effectively. They had more gap runs than they had in years past. That's something they're going to have to do. Like it's going to have to be more Pacheco. It's going to have to be more Jared Buchanan out of the backfield, because unless they can go out and trade for a Mike Evans in the next 24 hours, or they can get a significant addition at wide receiver, like this is all it's going to be. And I don't think you can expect Sky Moore to get better. I don't think you can expect Kadarius Toney to be the guy they're hoping for. Like those guys can play a role and they'll have games where they look solid. And, I think Rashee Rice is going to have moments where he looks exciting. He had a couple plays in this game where he was running away from people and that was fun. But like they're going to win in spite of their wide receivers, not because of them. And they're going to have to be firing on all cylinders in every other way to make that work. And like you said, is Kelce the guy he was a year ago? Is he banged up? I think it's fair to say he's not 100%. Jerick McKinnon had like one of the greatest runs of red zone performance we've ever seen from a running back at the end of that season as a receiver. Like, he has to be a focal point of the offense. Like, it's going to take every last drop of Patrick Mahomes playing at a high level and finding open receivers and extending plays for them to pull it off. And I know they did it, but they're going to have to be incredible to do that over the rest of the season.
Yeah, the funny thing is like how bad the Chiefs offense like feels when you watch them. And this is probably just bias based on how we've experienced this offense for over the past 5 years. They're still fifth in EPA per play. If you look at Ben Baldwin's site, rbsdealmatter.com. Terrible name for a website, Ben, please. I hate saying it, but yeah, it's great stuff on his website. A lot of good data. The Chiefs are fifth in EPA per play, but their running game has not helped them at all. They're 31st in success rate, 32.1% on the ground. So I think that's where, you know, you're starting to see where they can run into some trouble, you know, because they've become a team that kind of needs to run the ball, you know, to take some of the pressure off of not really Mahomes, but the guys around him at receiver, because they don't have it right now. And there's opportunities for guys to produce, but they're just not doing it.
Yeah. Let me ask you, do you think there is a guy they could realistically add in the next day who would be a difference maker for them at receiver? Would you say, I brought up Mike Evans and I was like, maybe he gets traded, maybe Hollywood could be an option. But like,
I mean, even Mike Evans is tough because I'm the Bucs. Like I'm still in the thick of it.
For sure, no question.
I don't. It's tough. I don't really know who's out there. Like I think they probably should have been more aggressive after like DeAndre Hopkins this offseason. But Hopkins was, and maybe this is recent bias off of Sunday's game, but even Hopkins is like, hey, no one really came after me except for Tennessee, which looks like kind of a mistake on the Chiefs' part. I don't really know who's out there. Obviously, like the big one would be, if it wasn't interdivision, get Devontae Adams from the
Devontae Adams. Oh,
yeah. What were you about to say?
Judy, maybe.
Oof. I feel like that's kind of what you have, just a collection of guys
frustrating players.
Yeah, at least Rashee Rice has turned out to be something, but even him as like your number one guy is not that exciting for this year. And I think even as promising as he's looked, it's probably like a high-end number two, so you still need to go get someone next year. Like if they can get to the Super Bowl with how this offense has looked, that would be unbelievable, I think. But they're still 6-2. They still very much control their own destiny. Like they could still get the number one seed in the AFC, but it just feels a little different than it has the past few years.
They're just a different kind of team. Like they're going to win with their running game. They're going to win with their defense. Mahomes is going to make plays. It's not like they're going to be like, grinded out football team, but I think they just have to be more complete than they've been in years past, because I don't think they can expect to have that explosive passing attack week after week.
Yeah. One team who did have an explosive passing attack, Tennessee Titans, in their first game with Will Levis. Will Levis threw for 4 touchdowns. We talked about one of the touchdowns where, DeAndre Hopkins probably got away with some OPI. But I will say, in your first start, 238 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks against one of the better defenses in football. That's not bad. So I guess the question everyone's asking is, should they keep Will Levis as a starter for the rest of the season? And I don't really know if I have like a full answer for that question, but I don't think that starting from the rest of the season is necessarily a bad idea.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
But what's fascinating about this is that all offseason, everything you heard out of Tennessee was Will Levis is not ready. Like they're not, they could have cut Ryan Tannehill in training camp and saved all of that guaranteed money on the final year of his deal, because his contract was not guaranteed till week 1. If Levis was ready, they could have saved like $28 million. I think it would have made sense for them to either cut him or do the Jimmy Garoppolo thing and make him take a pay cut or trade him or something to not have to rely on that. But Will Levis was not ready. He was hurt during the preseason, and he did not come out of school as a guy who was ready to step in. Even in this game, like not only did Mike Vrabel go out and not commit to Will Levis as his starter, but they brought in didn't commit to Will Levis as a starter, but they brought in Malik Willis for a snap where he fumbled early in this game. And I wonder if Willis was going to be a bigger part of this game in a rotation if the game plan had gone as expected. But pleasant surprise for Tennessee, Will Levis balled out, looked really good on play action, looked really good firing shots downfield. Frankly, should have had even more completions. Had one long throw to Treylon Burks that was just narrowly out of bounds, and had Chigakonkwo drop a crosser that would have been for a huge game as well. This could have been a 300-yard game for Will Levis with a couple more plays. So this was not a team that felt like it was going anywhere with Ryan Tannehill. It's not like they were the team from a couple of years ago where they looked like they were super efficient throwing the football. Like, they were struggling on offense with Tannehill in the fold. So to me, I think, like, ride the hot hand, especially if Tannehill's not ready to come back. Like, Rabel today, it was interesting how he positioned this. He was not saying, hey, Ryan Tannehill's our guy when he's healthy. It was more like Ryan Tannehill will have a shot to be our guy when he's healthy. So to me, I think this is Will Levis's job to lose right now.
Yeah, makes sense. And I mean, I saw some people asking the question, well, why didn't Malik Willis get this start? Well, we already saw Malik play this year, against the Ravens. I know that that's a tough defense, but, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to be mean about Malik Willis. Like, he's doing his best, but pretty telling that they brought in Josh Dobbs last year late in the season. Didn't give Malik Willis the opportunities after he had struggled. Pretty clear that when they drafted Will Levis in the second round this year, Malik Willis has kind of been usurped. I still think he has a role in an offense, but I mean, this is Will Levis's job to lose right now.
Yeah. Let's go to a team that I thought had some a game that I thought had some really interesting quarterback storylines. 49ers versus the Bengals, right? Where Joe Burrow, I mean, I don't know how he did it, but he's back. He's back. Like, from playing through that early season calf injury, I'm guessing, sitting out the bye and helping out was, and getting healthy during the bye was a big push for them. But dude, he killed this defense. Like, at one point, I think he had 19 straight completions, finished 28 for 32, 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase was absolutely balling this week. And then on the flip side, you had Purdy, who kind of struggled towards the end of the game. I don't think he was bad for the whole game. I thought he still had some nice plays, was able to run the offense, but it feels like it's becoming a trend when they need Purdy to kind of put on your big boy pants and make a play. That's something that he's still struggling with. So is this the quarterback trends that we saw between the 49ers and the Bengals? Like, how much is that going to define their season the rest of the way? Because I think it's history. The Bengals started off 0-2, just like they did last year, and here they are roaring back, scoring 30 points on one of the best defenses in the league on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two different scenarios. And I think, what we saw in this game is probably the players we'll see over the rest of the season. And from the Burrow side, like, it makes sense that they'd be better. Like, this is the first time he's really been healthy. And he said as much all season. It's the first time they've had a healthy Burrow and a healthy T. Higgins together. And not that, Jamar Chase was still the focal point of the offense in this game, but just having 2 star receivers you can throw to, who can run, is a pretty big difference maker for this offense. Joe Mixon had a good game. The big thing we saw that we haven't seen so far this year were explosive plays. Pat Thorman mentioned this on Twitter. It depends on which number you use, but for 20-yard games, 20 yards or more games, Bengals were last. They had 8 through 6 games. They had 6 alone against the Niners on Sunday. And I think, for as much crap as we give the Bengals for their offensive line play in front of Burrow, like, they won up front consistently throughout this game. They did not give Nick Bosa, did not give Javon Hargrave, did not give those Niners defensive linemen any time to create opportunities. So, to me, I feel like when you look at the Niners defense on paper, the concern is always, can the secondary hold up? Because we know the pass rush is great. We know the linebackers are great. It felt like early in this season, the Niners were able to hold up win coverage as well. But we've seen that the last couple of weeks, teams have taken advantage of them. And the Bengals did whatever they wanted in this game with their passing attack because the Niners couldn't cover them. So to me, I think just starting with the Bengals side, it felt like this was the same old Bengals, the same post-bye Bengals where they're 13-3 over the past couple of years that we've seen get hot in November and December.
Do we think something's wrong with Brock Purdy, or is this just kind of like the growing pains of a young quarterback? Or are we seeing the limits of what he's capable of?
We're seeing the limits of Kyle Shanahan technology. I feel so great because a couple of weeks ago on the Dominique Foxworth show, I got our mutual friend Dominique Foxworth to admit that Brock Purdy was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And now it just feels like we're getting right back to Jimmy G land and Dominique's belief that Brock Purdy was just another Jimmy Garoppolo. He held on to it just long enough to make it look bad. And then the moment he came off of it, now it feels like he's just the next Jimmy G. I'm being a little facetious. Like, I felt like we saw good stuff from Brock Purdy for most of this game, but we saw when he had to make plays, there were some questionable decisions. And I know there was some speculation today that maybe he's not fully recovered from the concussion he suffered last week, which certainly felt like late in the game. Last week, he made some decisions and some throws he would not make typically. It felt like in this game, like the one scramble where he threw the ball to a defensive lineman, like that's just bad luck. Like usually it's going to get knocked down. He was not having that happen earlier in the season. He was getting away with those. Now he's not, which I think is just randomness. The throw where the linebacker undercut it for a pick, I think that was just a terrible decision. We haven't seen Brock Purdy make as many of those bad decisions earlier in the season. But to me, it's just like this was a guy who was a very solid quarterback who earlier in the year had Trent Williams, had Deebo Samuel, had the full complement of stars around him, was not being pressed in the situations where he struggled, and was also a little bit lucky in terms of having some drop picks, in terms of having, some plays go his way. And now he doesn't have the full complement around him. He's still playing fine. He's still an NFL quarterback, but he's not being as lucky. He's having some of those plays turn into picks. And I think that's the thing that I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I just think we're seeing, sort of a different side of the coin for a guy who was probably not as good as he was being hyped up to be earlier in the season, probably not as bad as he's being perceived out to be now.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's interesting is the defense over the past few weeks has not been nearly as dominant as they were to start the year. So over the past few weeks, they ranked 26 in EPA per play, which is way below the standards that they expect, we've become accustomed to. And like even yesterday, it just felt like they had no hope to stop the Bengals offense. Even, talk about the offensive line, even Joe Mixon was running well against a pretty tough 49ers front. So like, I think that the bye came at the perfect time for them. Like you're on 3-week skid, you're playing way below your talent level, you're a little banged up, and now you get a chance to kind of reset before the bye. But the defense is something I think, want to keep an eye on because, they're in a transition year from D'Amico Ryans to Steve Wilks. Last time, they didn't really have a problem with that, going from Robert Saleh to D'Amico Ryans. There wasn't really a problem with the transition there. Now, over the past few weeks, we're starting to see some holes in the armor of the 49ers defense. And I wonder if that's going to be a trend because they have the talent to be the best defense in the league week in, week out. And I don't really think that there's any team that should be running up and down the field on them the way that the Bengals were yesterday. So it's a lot on Brock Purdy's plate, I think, even when you add in the defense not doing what they're supposed to do. And, maybe we should be a little bit more patient about a guy who was literally the last pick in the draft starting as, because this is like his 14th, 15th start, if that.
Yeah. I was not expecting you, Charles, to come out and be like, Brock Purdy has it too rough. We need to chill out and give him the benefit of the doubt. It's like he's in the dream situation for any quarterback. I don't recall anybody giving Trey Lance the same level of sympathy, and yet here we are.
I thought
know
you
were. Just
I know.
But you're right. Like the reality is like Trey Lance was someone the Niners brought in because he could create his own shot. He was someone who, could be a focal point of the running game. He could hit throws downfield. Like Kyle Shanahan brought him in dreaming that he was going to be the next Patrick Mahomes. And Brock Purdy, for whatever you want to say about Brock Purdy, even at his best, he was never the next Patrick Mahomes. He was never the next Justin Herbert. He was like a guy who you could get something out of. And we're seeing the limitations of that, just the same way we saw the limitations of this offense with Jimmy Garoppolo a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I wonder if this continues. I just wonder what they'll do because they already got burned going for the big arm quarterback once, and there's just I hate that it would take an injury for this to happen, but there's a part of me that wants to see Sam Darnold play just to see. I just want to see what it would look like. And look, I know it's gross, but he's like one of those guys where if you just cut like his 10 best plays, you'd be like, holy.
No question. I've been seeing them on Twitter for 6 years. I know. I can't deal with the people who are going to be like, I knew all along Sam Darnold was good. Like, no, Sam Darnold has sucked for 5 years, and he just happens to be in the right system now, if that works out. I mean, and I don't, obviously there's so much that has to happen between now and the end of the season and the start of next year. But a couple of events happened on Sunday that kind of led you to believe that a long-rumored quarterback might have a path to making his way to San Francisco next year. Some of that was Brock Purdy struggling, but the other part of it was Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles and ending probably his Vikings career in the process.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue. What's next for them? I
have no idea.
I have no idea. Like, because there's a day left until the trade deadline. Do you trade for like Ryan Tannehill? Do you trade for Jameis Winston? Or you just say, woof? Because look, I think Kevin O'Connell, he did enough last year to not get fired this year if they just skid out the rest of the way. And I think that's good because I think he's a really, talented coach, play caller. The roster just, they're getting a little bit of a transition. I think you kind of just ride it out with Jaren Hall.
Jaren Hall, maybe get Nick Mullins back in a few weeks. Maybe you're hoping that happens. Like how every path seems bad. Like you can poke so many holes in each path. Like, let's say they go and get a Tannehill. Well, Tannehill's hurt. Like he's going to be a free agent after the year. They're already in rough cap shape to begin with, so they're going to have to pay more in draft capital to get the Titans to eat more of his deal to get that trade to happen. And even then, with Kirk playing really well, they were a team that had every game come down to like the final few plays. They were 4-4 with Kirk. Like their ceiling is 6th seed in the NFC, playing probably the Lions in the first round, where you would not think they're going to win in Detroit. So like, is that really worth going out, giving up significant draft capital just so you can not let down your locker room, which seemed crestfallen yesterday after Kirk got hurt? But then like, if you tank, you're basically saying, yeah, we have no hope without Kirk. The rest of our season's meaningless. Like that has really damaging effects on your locker room. Like we saw it with the Browns when they were tanking. Like that situation felt hopeless for years until they had to make major changes. I don't know if O'Connell can recover from that. So like you could probably get a 2 for Daniel Hunter. You could probably get something for, a couple of the guys on your roster. But it's like, are you going to just leave Justin Jefferson off the field for the rest of the year? Like you're probably too good to tank for Williams or May. It's like, what do you do?
I remember Schefter said back when Justin Jefferson got hurt, hey, if this thing gets worse for the Vikings, you might not see him for the rest of the season, which, I mean, I kind of get this because this is about to be a huge investment for the Vikings because he's going to command $30 million a year,
$30+ million a year, yeah.
Right. So you got to kind of protect that. They're in a tough place where it's like, man, you never want to quit on the year because there's so much work that goes into each game, each practice, every minute of an NFL season. And then when you get to game day, you're never ever going to try to lose because it's like I said, it's too much work. It hurts too much. But if you're looking forward to next year and you lose out, you could say we will be in striking range of getting Drake May or Caleb Williams and putting them into an offense that has Kevin O'Connell calling the shots, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, who looks like an absolute star. The offensive line has some pieces. Maybe it's not all the way there yet. That's not a terrible situation for a rookie quarterback to walk into, especially like what we've seen. Bryce Young would love to walk into a situation like that. So I don't know. It's kind of tough how you play it. I think you just kind of give it your best shot with Jaren Hall and see where you're at in a few months.
Is there any quarterback, like, would you trade for Teddy? Would you trade for Jacoby Brissett if you could? Like, is there, like, are you just sort of...
Maybe just like to keep the development track for some of the younger guys on the team.
Yeah.
Just to look like a football team. Maybe you trade for Brissett or Teddy, but, you're not really doing too much with that, Maybe it's time for Kevin O'Connell to really dig in his bag and see what he's got or maybe Jaren Hall's the answer.
Maybe Jaren Hall's great. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe he's great.
So, but yeah, I mean, obviously such a weird situation. Like, I don't know what was going to happen with Kirk. He was going to be a free agent after the year. It certainly has not seemed like they were desperate to sign him to an extension, but he was playing great. Like, he was really playing good football. That offense was fun to watch every week. Now, Like, what does his contract look like next year? Does he want to come back to the Vikings? If he's a cheaper option than he would be without the Achilles, does that mean suddenly the Niners are a viable path? Maybe the Falcons are a viable path. Maybe Tennessee is a viable path. Like, I know Kirk is Kirk, and it's very easy to poke fun at him and very easy to hold him up as like the example of like the bad contract you hand out to veteran quarterbacks when you should be going for a cheaper, more higher upside option. But like, Kirk also guarantees you a lot of good football over the course of the season. And if you can get him for a lot cheaper than he would be otherwise because of the injury, like, he suddenly becomes a really valuable and exciting prospect to add to your organization, or exciting player to add to your organization. So I think that's going to be a really fascinating situation to consider now because of the injury.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. Just a lot of crap football coming down the pipeline. Ian Rappaport just tweeted, barring a significant change of plans, Cardinals rookie Clayton Tune is going to get the start this week. So we've got Jaren Hall, Clayton Tune, Will Levis, the first round quarterbacks. This is the year of the rookies. It's a lot of, yeah.
Once the Cardinals got that clear path to the first overall pick, they were like, we were accelerating. Like, they saw the open road and just put that foot down on the gas and said, we're heading there.
Yeah. Last point before we get out of here. There's been some movement for, I think, 2 wide receivers to get mentioned for MVP this year. Tyreek Hill, who was obviously, on an absolutely monster pace, and Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown, who was the first player in NFL history to have 6 straight games with 125 yards receiving, or something along those lines. I don't think it's possible, but I do like to see people thinking about it a little bit, especially in the case of Tyreek Hill. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. First off, I just think, how on earth did Tennessee trade A.J. Brown?
He looks like T.O. out there now. Like,
he looks better than T.O. Like, yeah. He's unstoppable each week. Like, he makes other NFL defensive backs look like children on a weekly basis. And it's incredible to watch, knowing that other teams are trying to take him out of the game each week, and it does not matter. Like, it's just, he is a force of nature. And, I think Hill is like more transformative in terms of changing what you can do on offense. Like, I think Jalen Hurts, if it was just Devontae Smith, and God, if they had just signed Allen Robinson to play across from Devontae Smith, like, I think Jalen Hurts would still be a really good quarterback. I don't know if that's the case with Tua without Tyreek. But like, I guess my question for you is, if we were going to construct a scenario where a wide receiver played well enough to win MVP, doesn't it feel exactly like how these guys are playing right now? Like if you were going to say this is what it would take for a wide receiver to pull this off, like, you would be describing A.J. Brown setting NFL records. You'd be describing Tyreek Hill like breaking NFL defenses each week and putting up like the easiest 150 yards a week you've ever seen. Like, it just feels like we're getting what we would need for that to happen. But I think our brains are so focused on quarterback that like we can't even conceive of a universe where wide receivers would be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I do think Tyreek Hill has a stronger case than AJ Brown, only because it's just hard not to watch. And I know that it's kind of similar with the AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts stuff, but just the way that this Miami offense is constructed, like around the talents of like Tyreek Hill, like you can't be a team that throws the ball in like 2.3 seconds and also leads the league in ADOT without someone like Tyreek Hill. It's not the same as where, sometimes Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, I think especially since, they've been trying to break in this new offensive coordinator, there's a lot of, kind of backyard football to what they're doing. But this is constructed. Like Tyreek Hill, he's on pace for 2,155 yards, 17 touchdowns. The 2,000 yards would obviously be an NFL record. He's got the most yards through 8 games in NFL history. If this can't get MVP consideration, then I don't know how anyone could, because we're watching, some of the best wide receiver play, some of the most productive wide receiver play that I've ever seen. I really would not have a problem with Tyreek Hill getting like serious consideration for MVP based on what he's done and what he means to like the best offense in the league right now.
what would it take? Like if there was a number line for you to put out there, if you were like, okay, I believe this would actually sway however 26 voters or whatever you need, like is it 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns? Like is there a number you can put out there that would?
I think 2,000. I think 2,000 gets people voting.
Just like the Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, just like the Adrian Peterson one. Like it's just a nod to what the hell did you just do this season? Like it's borderline unbelievable. So I think once you start getting to 2,000 yards, he's going to be approaching 20 touchdowns. That's like so unheard of that it should get you some serious consideration, I think.
Here's the problem, though. If he and A.J. Brown both do it, I think they're going to take away votes from each other. Like one of those two guys has to take a step backwards, pull a hamstring or something. Like it has to be one guy accelerating past that point. Because if it's like two or three guys, I feel like it's going to take away from it. But like this, it's sort of a year where like there's not like a quarterback who's like an overwhelming obvious candidate to win either. I think that also makes it more likely.
Yeah. It's like, wait, who is the front runner right now? Like just in terms of
Tua. I think Tua's my pick after week 4, but Tua's not playing great right now.
Yeah.
Purdy's been a mess. Mahomes has been good, but like the numbers aren't there. He's not going to win it if he plays worse than he did a year ago. Hurts has been good, but like you said, so much of that offense feels like it's, backyard football. Like just toss it up to AJ and he'll figure it out from there.
Lamar Jackson, like they've kind of been up and down on offense this year.
Yeah, I think Lamar's been great. He's probably my pick right now, but like there's not that obvious quarterback candidate, and I think that also contributes to it. Like I think you have to have a year where there's not a blow away number one quarterback who convinces you that he has to be the guy, because for a wide receiver to have great numbers, quarterback has to contribute as well. So like you have to have a wide receiver who's so dominant that people just don't vote for the quarterback instead.
Yeah. See, that's where I think Tyreek Hill is right now. So hopefully we can buck a trend and, but it's just funny that it takes Tyreek Hill, Adrian Peterson, 2,000 yard season for, some of these guys to get some votes. Bill, before we let you out of here, you want to let the people know what you're working on? What you got coming down the pipeline? What you do?
Too much stuff. What I do, I write for ESPN.com. I appear on various ESPN programs, including Around the Horn, SportsCenter, all that good stuff. On Twitter at Bill Barnwell. Yeah, just do a lot of stuff. Just watch too much football. I feel like I'm in the middle of like the football zone right now, where like my wife will tell me about stuff that's happening in the real world, and I'm just like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm gonna watch Tyson Bagent play football now for an hour for some reason to torment myself. So
hey, it's a nice distraction from some things that are going on out there.
Yes, no question. No question. Love this. Very spoiled to have this job, but you know how it is. Like football is all encompassing for 4 months, and I'm halfway in that mess right now.
Yeah, I'm feeling the mid-season, exhaustion. It's getting dark a little early. Daylight saving time's almost over.
YouTube didn't work yesterday. Sunday Ticket was a mess yesterday.
ESPN all over the place, like you said. Send us a voicemail. You can go to speakpipe.com/0blitz. You can ask me a question, send your hottest take, make fun of me, make fun of the show, or reply to them on the show. We'll be back with another episode of the Exempt List every Tuesday. Tune in tomorrow for inside coverage with Jason Fitz, Charles Robinson, and Tori Epstein. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts. Bill is at Bill Barnwell. Producer Stone Rochelle is at SJ Rochelle. And we will see you next week.